The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by the UMass 5 College Credit Union, offering co-op advantage checking with cash back on all purchases, plus secure debit card controls, all from the UMass 5 mobile banking app. Insured by NCUA, umass5.coop.
Welcome to the Fabulous 413. I'm Khalees Smith.
And I'm Monty Belmonte. Later in the show, we'll partner pints with 4-century-old banter with Valley Players' Bard in the Bar event happening in Northfield.
We'll also do more on stage with one man's grandmother's memoir translated into klezmer-influenced pedal steel at Bombyx Center for the Arts and Equity tomorrow with Mike Friedman and his latest work, About This It Was Not Yet Written.
Plus, Mr. Universe, Kainaat Studios, and Hampshire College's Salman Hameed is taking a new look at a very old hat.
And what the upcoming change in administration means for the future of NASA.
To boldly go where no man has gone before.
At the Amherst kitchen table of Hampshire College astronomer Dr. Salman Hameed, Mr. Universe bumped to Wednesday because of the Merriam-Webster Word of the Year coming out on Monday. The Merriam-Webster Word of the Year, as we learned, polarization, which has a very different meaning when it comes to why it was Word of the Year, but has an astronomical meaning as well.
Well, I thought it would be really cool. Like, finally, there's an astronomy word, the way the light gets polarized in certain ways, including the image from the supermassive black hole, the accretion disk around it near the event horizon. That light got polarized in a particular way in a particular angle. And so astronomers like to talk about polarization.
Well, there we go. There's a positive aspect to polarization in this country and the world, too.
And if you want to reduce it, you can always get those sunglasses, polarized light.
Sunglasses. Yeah, I think I have those, actually. They make water look amazing in the summertime. You are also, a quick aside, my son, Peter Cratchit, in NEPM's production of A Very 413 Christmas Carol starring Elizabeth Perkins as Scrooge. Thank you for doing that last week. That was really fun.
Thank you for having me there, and all I can say is, Papa. Oh, Papa. That was the acting.
Salman had to call me Papa over and over again. And it was nice.
I love it when you call me Big Papa.
And Emily Brewster was also my child. Tiny Tim.
Tiptoe through the tulips.
A lot of fun. I have to say, I'm working with everybody from NEPM, all these people who I was meeting for the first time. I had heard their voices a lot, but it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and you, listener, will be able to hear it on the radio. But we are talking about what everybody's been talking about over the last couple of weeks, which is Trump cabinet picks. And there is an astronomical Trump cabinet pick that you want to talk about. There's also an astronomical pick, meaning picture, that we're going to talk about too.
Right. So because billionaires don't get enough hearing. I think that's the most marginal class. They're very few, if you think about it.
They're only the 1%, and so we're not paying enough attention to them.
Exactly. So finally, they're going to get some real voice and influence in the White House, and I think that's good for a marginal class. President-elect Trump has announced his NASA pick, and that is, it may come as a surprise, is also a billionaire, and it's Jared Isaacman. He did Shift for payments. That was a company, I think, for processing of payments and things like that. But he is a space buff. He's a pilot as well, jet pilot. And but one of the things that we know from him more is the fact that he has been in space on SpaceX missions, in fact, twice. The more recent one earlier this year was the one where he became the first person, along with another, to do an actual spacewalk.
So this is more than just a space tourist. He wasn't going up into low Earth orbit like William Shatner and then just coming right back down. He literally went into space.
Yes.
And well, that's interesting, because probably no head of NASA has actually ever been in space, right?
No, they have.
Oh, really?
Yes. But he's not coming from an experience in working with NASA, nor with experience in running a large government organization. And he's also very close to Elon Musk, as you can imagine, because he went on SpaceX.
SpaceX, which is Elon Musk's private space program that has worked many times with NASA and has been collaborating even under non-Trump administrations with a sort of a public-private partnership about the future of space travel.
So it's unclear. It's like what will be the future direction under him. He is also the one who has proposed boosting the orbit of the Hubble Space Telescope. Right now, NASA doesn't have any plans to do that, and he has suggested before as a private mission. So we don't know where things are going to go with him. He himself recently said, I can confidently say, this is Jared Isaacman, the NASA pick by President-elect Trump, I can confidently say this second space age has only just begun. Space holds unparalleled potential for breakthroughs in manufacturing, biotechnology, mining, and perhaps even pathways to new sources of energy. So he's certainly coming from a business perspective, and this particular direction is perhaps not that much different from what NASA has been taking anyway. But I think one place to keep an eye on is what will be the emphasis on return to the moon or not. And that is because Elon Musk has always been more focused on Mars. And for some people, that has been a little bit of a distraction of going back to the moon. There has been an alternative approach of Mars Direct. Right now, the Artemis missions that are supposed to take Americans back to the moon and Canadians, that has been postponed again. In fact, just this past week, Artemis 2, which is supposed to take astronauts around the moon and bring them back, initially was supposed to be this year. Now it's in 2026. The landing mission of humans to the moon is 2027. We don't know when Jared Isaacman comes in, if he gets confirmed by the Senate, if they're going to scrap it or not, sort of like these moon missions. Or right now, Boeing is also part of it. Blue Origins also has part of it. Or are they going to just go with SpaceX? Everything is up in the air. We don't know much about his policy perspectives. So that would be interesting.
Initially, when a return to the moon was proposed, many people who love outer space were like, we already did this. Like, been there, done that, literally. Why is it exciting? Then, when we heard more about the Artemis mission, and Artemis, the sister to Apollo, a female-fronted mission here, which would have been the first woman on the moon, became exciting. But what is still exciting to you about a mission to the moon versus trying to do what Elon Musk and maybe Jared Isaacman, who is going to probably be the new head of NASA, might want to do, which is Mars Direct?
I mean, there are two ways to think about it. I can give you the answer in terms of the policy perspective in the way NASA thinks about or NASA has thought about. And that is more about we need to go back and this time as a permanent presence on the moon, which Apollo program was not designed for that. It was just to beat the Soviet Union at the time. And so there is a lot of emphasis on what can be done, and that includes, for example, mining on the moon, going to the South Pole because there is potential water over there, and to establish a presence and be the first ones to do that. In fact, just last week, Bill Nelson, the current head of NASA, he actually, in fact, said, that it is vital for us. I'm quoting the current head of NASA. It is vital for us to land on the South Pole so that we do not cede portions of that lunar South Pole to the Chinese. So there is this element of space race that is part of that. But if you ask me for why moon is exciting, why moon is going back to the moon would be amazing, and that is its scientific return from it. Because the kind of astronomy, for example, that you can do from the moon, especially from the far side of the moon, which is shielded from light from radio communications from the Earth and other kinds of things, and it doesn't have an atmosphere, you can do science from the moon that you cannot do from any place on Earth or even in the nearby solar system. If you can get actual samples from the moon, for example, this water that has collected over billions of years in these permanently shadowed regions, that can provide us with amazing clues about the formation of the moon and the solar system. And as an astronomer and as somebody who was always excited about space, I think humans should go to space. And I'm excited about that as species, we are stepping into this vast sort of space, and the moon is just the first step. My concerns as it comes in how we are going to do it and why we are doing it. If it is about profits, if it's about exploitation of lunar resources, doing the same mistakes that we have made here on Earth, then it's a problem. And with these billionaires leading these charges, that's where I think the problem comes in. I do want to go into space. I think humans should go to space. But I think it's equally important, perhaps more important, how we go into space and what values we bring to space.
Speaking with Hampshire College astronomer Dr. Salman Hameed, also the head of Kainaat Studios, teaching astronomy via the means of video to people, most specifically in South Asia. There's Wookie the dog! My favorite little buddy, who's a good boy. You are Wookiee. Apart from all the drama surrounding the Trump cabinet picks and the potential new NASA head, there is a pick that you are showing me that we will describe to you, radio listener. When I first saw it, it looked like if you took a coconut, husk and all, and cut it in the thinnest little slice with the brown rim around the edge and then like a white center. That is a galaxy that we are looking at right now. But this galaxy is called not the coconut galaxy,
You think you just fell out of a coconut tree?
but something not too disconnected, as the place that I learned how to open a coconut by myself was Mexico. This galaxy has a fun nickname.
It's called the Sombrero Galaxy. It's one of the most beautiful galaxies out there. Astronomers are great at names, as Monty, we have talked many times. They look at it, they go like, hey, what does it look like? It looks like a sombrero.
Usually they just give it a number and some boring acronym that doesn't make any sense. But the Sombrero Galaxy, good on you.
It's a bright galaxy. It's amongst, I think, the 20 brightest galaxies in the sky. You still need a telescope to see it. But it's called the Sombrero Galaxy. It's about close to 30 million light years away, which in some sense you go like, whoa, it's far. It's a nearby galaxy. Andromeda Galaxy, which is the nearest spiral galaxy, nearest galaxy like our own, is about 2 million light years away. So it's only about 28 million light years away. When we talk about those galaxies that James Webb Space Telescope is finding in the farthest edges of the universe, those are like 13 billion light years away with a B. So this galaxy is nearby. It's beautiful. In fact, for my PhD work and a little bit later, I also worked on this galaxy. So it's like, it's a personal connection to it. So it's a beautiful galaxy. But one of my favorite images from the Hubble Space Telescope, and that's the one that, Monty, I'm showing you, that was of the Sombrero Galaxy, but taken by the Hubble Space Telescope. And
The coconut version of the photo.
right, and it has, the strange thing about that is, it has a large bulge, meaning to say it has a large white light that you see. That is because you cannot resolve individual stars and you see this fuzzy blob of light. But right in the middle, you have this dust lane. And this dust lane is the one that
It's the coconut shell.
is the coconut shell, and you see it well. So Hubble Space Telescope looked at it, provided a detailed view of that. But now, as you imagine, the reason why we are talking about it is that James Webb Space Telescope has also looked at it. And what it has done is it has seen through that halo of stars and has revealed incredible details of that dust lane.
And because James Webb uses a different type of light to process this data, we can get different images from James Webb. Hubble is like DVD. James Webb is like Blu-ray. Now our coconut galaxy, the Sombrero Galaxy, does look blue.
Okay, now that's just an artificial color because remember, we do not see with the infrared eyes. Our eyes do not see it. So
Yeah, all of these images are interpreted through light that our eyes can't actually see. So all of it is a hoax.
Hold on. The Hubble image is actually with the filters that kind of replicate what your eyes would see, but not with the James Webb Space Telescope.
Okay.
But what it does is it takes out the large halo of stars, and you can really see this dust. This dust comes alive in the infrared, in the particular light that James Webb Telescope sees. And it gives you a very close details about what's going on in that disk. And now this is a little bit of a strange galaxy. Why people are excited to look at this is because it's a really big galaxy. It has several times the number of stars that Milky Way has, even though in terms of size, it's close to the Milky Way. And it has a very big supermassive black hole at the center. It's one of the largest supermassive black holes in the universe, and yet it is not doing much. It is actually relatively quiet. Why? We don't know. You have this big galaxy, but it doesn't have much star formation, including in this disk. Usually these type of disks are very dusty. That's what we see here. Mm-hmm. They should have a lot of stars forming in there. And yet, this particular galaxy has a lot less star formation than the Milky Way.
But it has more stars than the Milky Way, so they're already formed.
It already formed, so whatever happened, but now it's not happening. Why not? Mm-hmm. So the James Webb Space Telescope provides you with a little bit of a glimpse. It's an interesting case where you have all the conditions there. You have all this dust there, which usually is part of star formation, and yet The star formation is very little. It starts just like little percolation of that. Look at the image. So just go, for people on the radio, Google or whatever you use, Sombrero Galaxy James Webb Space Telescope, and then look at this image. And what they have done is there is also a slider on the James Webb site, which actually allows you to basically slide between the Hubble image and superimposed on it the James Webb image.
I love doing that. DVD, Blu-ray.
That's exactly
DVD,
right.
Blu-ray.
And it's a beautiful image.
One of my favorite parts of A Christmas Carol, where you played Peter Cratchit, my son, Hampshire College astronomer Dr. Salman Hameed, was backstage, you nerding out about astronomy with a guy who makes his own little worlds out of glass and happens to be married to a flipping astronaut, Josh Simpson. That was really fun for me to eavesdrop on those conversations about both of you getting so excited about the mysteries of the universe, and him and his artistic interpretations of those mysteries, and you and your scientific interpretations. Really, it was really great.
We had to reduce our voices because the
show was going on stage.
We were in the next act, and we were like, okay, but no, that was, again, I wish people could hear sort of just in general, the conversation around the show. And Josh Simpson, his glasswork is so incredible, and they are inspired by astronomy. One of the things we were talking about, lunar regolith, the lunar soil, has a lot of silica in it. About 60% is silica. Which makes glass. And so that's what he does. And I mean, it's just like talking to a scientist, because he works over there, right? I mean, so he has so much experience, and so he is working with other people on thinking about how to use the lunar regolith to produce habitats on the moon decades from now. And I think it's just so cool.
A very 413 Christmas Carol starring Mr. Universe, Salman Hameed, and Elizabeth Perkins, and us, and so many more, can be heard on Saturday, December 21st at 11 a.m. And then on Christmas Eve, instead of this show, on Tuesday the 24th at 3.
I mean, it's sort of named
It's still
for
the
us,
same
so
show.
okay.
I mean, we're in it, so I
It's
guess it's
fine.
just a different version of this show.
Exactly. Coming up, pedal steel meets an untold story traversing across Eastern Europe with Mike Friedman's latest composition about this it was not yet written.
But first, a more informal stage bringing community together under the umbrellas of Shakespeare and beer. Shakespeare?
No.
We talk with folks from the Valley Players about Bard in the Bar next.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
It's stupid that they didn't spell phonetically, don't you think? It's
The
ridiculous.
Phoenicians didn't think so.
Maybe they did spell it phonetically.
They did, in fact.
Spelled everything phonetically. It's like all food in China is Chinese food.
Hey.
What is this cough button?
Oh, that, if you push it, makes a cough sound effect. I have a fart button over here.
Don't.
Push it.
Yeah, right.
See? Don't think I'm not going to edit that sound effect in. That witty repartee leads us right into the Bard.
We are literally here all the week.
Welcome back to the Fabulous 413. This Friday, December 13th, from 7 to 9:30 at the brewery at 4 Star Farms in Northfield, it's the Valley Players' second Bard in the Bar, presenting Shakespeare's tragic comedy, The Winter's Tale.
Bard in the Bar is an unrehearsed, script in hand, drink in hand reading of a Shakespeare play to benefit a local nonprofit. Admission is free and there are no reservations, but donations are encouraged. And for this reading, half of our donations will go to the Food Bank of Western Massachusetts.
Valley Players is itself a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to enriching the quality of life in the Connecticut River Valley by producing high-quality community theater. And we are joined by the president of the Valley Players, Matteo Pangalo. Did I do right?
Pangalo.
Pangalo, after all that.
It's a tricky one.
I know. Matteo Pangalo, as well as performers Kiki Durzik, who has been... You've been in the studio?
No.
No, we
someone
covered
did
we covered another one of
a
your
show
productions.
that I was in. Yeah,
Yes.
Lizzie.
And the iconic singer-songwriter and actor Tracy Grammer, who's come as a Live Music Friday performer, but now comes as a Valley Player.
Yeah.
We'll start with Mr. President, Matteo.
God.
Talk about the creation of Valley Players and your mission in bringing this sort of theater and collaborative theater to the Connecticut River Valley.
So Valley Players was an idea that was sort of being kicked around by a few folks many years ago. Not many years ago, pre-pandemic. And then the
So 1,000 years ago.
Yes, a lifetime ago.
Before times.
Yeah.
Obviously, those events sort of put a hold on actually trying to start a new theater company. But once it became possible to really get into live theater again, I thought it's a good time to get this started. So we had a sort of open community meeting in November of last year to gather ideas from folks about what a community-based community theater might look like, and then we incorporated in January of this past year. We did a kickoff event to the Scenathon in Amherst, sort of a cabaret night of scenes from different plays and speeches from different plays. In April and May, we did our first Bard in the Bar, which was Much Ado About Nothing.
No, don't diminish it. I think it was
it
great.
was fantastic.
Yeah.
That was at White Line Brewing in Amherst. And then we did our first full production, which Kiki was in, Nick Payne's Constellations, which we did at the Munson Library in October, and that was a partial benefit. Half of the proceeds from that went to Cancer Connection of Northampton. A large part of the mission of Valley Players is centered around these sort of three values of creating nimble, meaningful, and accessible community theater. So everybody's a volunteer. The auditions are all open. Tickets are either free or priced on a pay-what-you-can scale, so anybody can come. And importantly, half of the net ticket revenue is donated to another nonprofit or charity serving the Valley.
I think that's amazing. We're in the midst of just getting over the food bank march. So when we saw Shakespeare, brewery, food bank, you're coming on the show.
I haven't been to, but I know of other Bard in the Bar events that have happened in other places. There's something about reading Shakespeare aloud in places where alcohol or beverages are being served that just really appeals.
You know, obviously, these are plays that are scripts. They're meant to be read out loud. But I guess you could say the original performance context was in theaters and taverns where people were drinking while also watching the play. Certainly, some of the actors were probably drinking while performing it. But part of the inspiration here is that in Shakespeare's time, when a professional playwright like Shakespeare was pitching an idea for a play to an acting company, they would get together at a local bar and have drinks and food and talk about the story. They would talk about who might work in which parts. They would try improvising or even reading parts if parts had been drafted. But it was really about experimentation and having a good time and a general sense of goodwill around creating theater. And that's kind of behind what we're trying to do also with Bard in the Bar.
And Bard in the Bar will happen this Friday, December 13th, starting at 7 at the brewery at 4 Star Farms in Northfield. And that is the president of the board of the Bard in the Bar, Matteo Pangallo.
Yeah.
Kiki Durzik, you've been in full production through the Valley Players. What draws you to this style of community theater and this particular Bard in the Bar event?
Well, first of all, that it exists draws me to it. I only got back into doing theater last year with Lizzie.
The Lizzie Borden musical?
The Lizzie Borden musical, which was in Holyoke.
And I mentioned that I'd gone to the show, and your first question was, were you in the Splash Zone?
Yeah.
And if that encourages anyone else to see that show in the future, whether it's locally or not locally.
There's only a few musicals where you'll be in danger of getting blood splattered on you.
Evil Dead, the musical, is one of them.
Sweeney Todd.
You could be in the Splash Zone for Winter's Tale if somebody spills their beer on you.
Yes, it is a very different kind of splash zone.
There is a bear that eats a person.
Yes. Most famous stage direction of all time.
Direction ever.
Exit pursued by a bear. Yeah. Also a wine company that is fronted by Kyle MacLachlan from Twin Peaks.
Hello!
Quick aside.
Oh my gosh. And just getting involved with this one is kind of a no-brainer. This is something we're able to do with no rehearsal, in fact, which is wonderful in a community theater setting because, you know, we're all adults who are have lives that we're trying to make happen. So there's not always space for doing theater, and, you know, opportunities like this, when they come around, I'm going to hop on there.
What do you do in your adult life, Kiki?
I work with children, but I was a UMass theater student back in the day, and I'd spent a good 10 years away from doing anything on the stage, just trying to get a screenplay made, so I know all about that, the horrors.
And you're still sticking with performance. I love it.
Sticking with? I don't know. I just keep getting pulled back in.
Leave, really.
It's like The Godfather Part 3.
Just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in.
The people who leave and, like, leave it entirely, I just am kind of like, don't you feel like you're missing, like, a limb?
Well, and coming back to theater after the years and years and so many drafts that go into trying to do something on that scale in film, it's just so wonderful to be doing something where it's just immediate and it's all happening right now and the audience is there. So it's beautiful.
Matteo, you in your grown-up life are an English professor?
I am. I'm a professor of Shakespeare and Renaissance drama primarily, but I teach a range of other things.
Where do you teach?
I teach at Virginia Commonwealth University in the great city of Richmond, Virginia.
That's quite a commute.
It is. I'm living that active academic lifestyle in multiple worlds.
And Tracy Grammer, we've already mentioned that your grown-up life, you are an incredible singer-songwriter. What draws you to this style of community theater with the Valley Players?
Well, I did the last Bard in the Bar, and it was just so much fun because anyone can do it. And it was so much fun seeing new people, hearing the story on its feet. You know, I hadn't read Much Ado in a long time. And so it was just fun to meet new people, meet new actors, meet new neighbors, and just do something that, like Kiki was saying, just light, low stakes, lots of fun. And for me, this kind of community building it's refreshing after so many years of being on the road by myself.
Yeah.
I found that after the pandemic, I just needed people. And so I really sort of pivoted into theater over the last few years. And It's been so rewarding. And I have to say, I really think everyone should try it. And this is a great way to get your foot in the door.
Totally low stakes. The thing that intimidates me to no end about Shakespeare in particular is the memorization. And my children have been doing Shakespeare for their entire life. And the fact that they're so good at memorizing it makes me feel a very little bit of mental acuity that I have left is not going to be able to be enough to be in Shakespeare. So book in front of you at a bar with a beer in hand, I can swing that.
It's
then if you mess up, you know, that's you in the splash zone.
Throw a drink in my face again at a bar.
Distract them with bears.
Yeah. Do you have your roles? Because you have not rehearsed this. You'll just be reading it live this Friday.
So this is kind of leaning in a bit to what Tracy was mentioning. You know, a real primary value in this Bard in the Bar is ensuring that anybody that wants to get involved can get involved, right? So we have folks that are essentially professional actors, and we have seasoned community theater people from the area that folks will know. But then we also have people who told me when they contacted me, I'd like to sign up. I've never done theater before. To be fair to everybody, because there isn't an audition or anything, essentially the roles were randomly assigned. I think I did about a week ago. I wanted to make sure that I had the full list of about 20 actors. So everybody has their parts and the script, but we haven't met or rehearsed yet.
What are your parts, Tracy Kramer?
I am Autolycus. Autolycus is a rogue and a thief and a pickpocket and a balladeer.
Oh, that's what my 11-year-old plays in the play. Because I caught them watching Oliver to learn how to pickpocket.
You got to pick a pocket.
That is the most dangerous thing I've heard you say. That particularly your 11-year-old is learning to pickpocket.
Yeah, they're going to be real good at it.
Okay, don't hang out with packs anymore.
Only theatrically. I don't think.
Well, I don't know.
On the street, the singing would probably.
It's a dead giveaway.
One of the few things I did ask people when they signed up is, are you comfortable singing in front of people or not?
Yeah.
And a stunningly large number of people who said, no, please, for the sake of everybody.
Oh, because Autolycus sings, too, because my 11-year-old is preparing for that as well.
Yeah, he comes in singing, so
nice.
Yep.
What about you, Kiki? Who do you play?
I play Paulina or Paulina.
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 Oh, my,
Polenta.
one of my favorite characters in Shakespeare.
I did another Shakespeare character like that who was Mariah or Maria, depending on who you talk to. So we'll say Paulina. She is a lady-in-waiting to the queen who steps up heroically and tries to advocate for the queen and her children. And then, does just like a little gigantic magic trick.
Just one of my favorite characters in Shakespeare, and one of the, I think, strongest women characters in the plays. Up there with Cleopatra and Beatrice, in my estimation.
Yeah.
And Mateo, are you reading as well, or are you just directing the whole thing?
I'm not directing anything. I provided some suggestions and notes to folks, and I cut the script a bit. I'll be reading stage directions where needed.
Yes, because
so
you got the most
I
famous
get to
line
say
from
yes.
this play.
That's right.
And A Winter's Tale has a stage direction called Exit, Pursued by a Bear, which is incredibly specific in the Shakespeare world.
You have this listed as a tragicomedy, but I've always seen Winter's Tale listed as a romance. Can you get into the difference a little bit? Or is there a difference?
There really isn't a difference.
Okay.
The term tragicomedy is more historically appropriate in many ways. The term romance in Shakespeare's time would have referred to essentially what we would call today a novel, but we have sort of come to adopt that term to describe the same category of the same genre, essentially, of drama, being a tragicomedy. It's a late play. It's one of the last plays Shakespeare wrote, and it has that hallmark of a mature artist writing what he knows is one of his final works. I think it's a beautifully crafted play. It's one of my favorites.
And we're talking about The Winter's Tale, which will be performed at Bard in the Bar at the brewery at 4 Star Farm in Northfield this Friday, December 13th, from 7 to 9:30, performed on book with beer in hand. by the Valley Players.
It is easier because you don't have to memorize anything. But what is particularly difficult about doing live readings as opposed to memorization and performance in that way?
Kiki?
Well, I guess that it's just you don't know you really don't know what's going to happen, and you don't know if you're going to stumble over, or maybe you didn't highlight something. I did my read through yesterday and was like, oh, I just didn't highlight a whole bunch of things, so people would be waiting for lines that were not coming.
Dramatic pause.
But that's probably another thing that's going to lend a lot of fun to this event. That it is going to be unexpected, and those things happen when you do read-throughs in rehearsal.
Tracy, you've done this before. What was fun about it, and what are you looking forward to? What's challenging about it?
Well, one thing that was fun about it was that some people showed up in costume.
Oh, yes.
With props. That was hilarious. But sometimes you were talking about the challenges. Sometimes the language can trip us up a little bit. It's not today's language.
Ironically, you get confused with the grammar.
Ironically. And I was an English major. It's
Tracy Grammer is her name, Tracy Grammer.
Yeah. So I've been thinking in terms of a costume. I've been thinking, it was also fun that you have the option of just sitting there with your beer or your cranberry seltzer and your script and just reading through. But you also have the option to get up and roam and make it physical. And so I'm curious to see what people will do. I'm curious to see if someone that I am supposed to pickpocket will let me actually do that, just to see what happens when we mingle and bring it to life.
And I think another challenge with reading, though, is also eye contact,
yeah.
which for actors is so crucial on stage. But if you're looking at your script, it's so freeing to be able to look up off the script. So.
Yeah.
So you've got about 50 plus Shakespeare plays to work through if you decide to work through the whole catalog.
And lots of breweries in Western Mass.
But would you consider are you considering doing this with more modern pieces or even contemporary pieces of Shakespeare's?
I would love to do other plays by writers. I mean, there were literally hundreds of other playwrights in Shakespeare's time. There's so many plays. I would love to do that. I would certainly love to do modern plays that have the same energy of community, if that makes sense, or ensemble that Shakespeare plays kind of require. Obviously, the name Bard in the Bar, kind of constrains a little bit, but there's no reason that we would be necessarily limited only to Shakespeare. I mean, the primary value of Shakespeare is that sense of his plays demand a sense of ensemble and collaboration. There are lots of roles, so lots of people can get involved. And it's known. It's a known quantity, and so people will come out because they're familiar with it.
Too bad Wilson's closed. You could do like August Wilson at Wilson's.
Wow.
What other?
With who?
Checkers with Chekhov.
Oh, my God.
Bart in the Bar, do some Simpsons episodes.
I love it. The sky is the limit. And that is at the heart of community theater and the Valley Players, who this Friday, December 13th at 7 o'clock will be at the brewery at 4-Star Farm in Northfield doing Bard in the Bar, reading Shakespeare's The Winter's Tale. And we've been joined by the president of the Valley Players, Matteo Pangallo, Kiki Dursic, and Tracy Grammer.
If folks want more information, or if they want to find out about the next Bard in the Bar, or if they want to make a donation to support the food bank and Valley Players, they can go to valleyplayers.org.
Awesome. And this, again, is it's a free event, but with donations going to our beloved food bank. Mm-hmm. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
It's always a winter.
From the work of the faraway past to that of this past century, up next, we speak with Mike Friedman about his latest work taking the stage at Bombyx tomorrow night, a multidisciplinary performance called About This, It Was Not Yet Written. I can get those words out.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
It's hard to conjugate that verb.
Yeah, grammar.
I know.
The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by UMass Amherst School of Public Policy, offering graduate programs in public affairs, public policy and administration, data analytics, and computational social science. umass.edu/SPP. The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Northeast Solar, offering solar options, energy security, and solutions for the local community. Learn more at northeast-solar.com.
Welcome back to the Fabulous 413. What do you do with an unread manuscript that tells the story of a teenage Romanian Jewish girl's journey across 5 countries and 7 languages?
If you're Mike Friedman, you share it with a close friend who then collaborates with you to transform the narrative into a live performance that blends storytelling and readings from the book with original music, klezmer tunes, and Yiddish folk melodies from the Eastern European cities where the author, Mike's grandmother, sought refuge.
About This, It Was Not Yet Written is more than just a concert. This performance is an act of discovery and healing, and it will be performed tomorrow, Thursday, December 12th, 7 o'clock at Bombyx Center for Arts and Equity in Florence. Welcome, Greenfield's Mike Friedman. Thanks so much for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
So my first question is, where did you find the memoir? Where did you find this writing?
Well, I always knew about it. I grew up with my grandmother, and she was, in my childhood, she was always writing it. It took her like over 2 decades to write it. Oh. And then there was the day when it was done, and she brought it in a box, and she presented it to my family, my mom and my aunt. And then it just sat for a long time, and no one really wanted to engage with it. And I was always discouraged from reading it. Everyone was saying, oh, it's poorly written, and you kind of don't want to go there. It's dark stuff. And so, as a teenager, so I let that in, and I didn't think about it too much. And then during the pandemic, I started to think about it a lot. And I called my mom, and I said, can you please send it to me? And she kept saying, I will send it to you, no problem. But I never got it. Uh-huh. So then I started calling my aunt, and I had the same situation. And then eventually I found out that I had a cousin who had the final copy, and she was in Chicago, and she started scanning it and sending it to me in installments. Uh-huh. She sent me, and the book's in 2 parts. She sent the second part first, and then the first part. But until I got the whole thing, I didn't know if I would ever get the whole thing. I didn't know if she even had it. So, I was kind of on edge for about a year. And that was how I found it.
Apart from being allegedly poorly written, what was it, do you think, that was keeping the family from wanting you to read it? Was it to try to protect you, to try to protect your grandmother, or something else?
That's something I thought about a lot. And part of this project is this drummer, Dave Clark, who's coming in from Toronto, who also read the book. We were reading it at the same time during the pandemic. He was in Toronto. I was in Greenfield. We were talking on the phone a lot. And there was one night where I was like in a field late at night. I couldn't sleep. We're on the phone. And I was like, why doesn't anyone in my family read this? I just can't understand it. There's so much there. There's so much depth. And he, it was really helpful because this is my family, so I'm connected in a certain way. But this is not his family, and his history is very different. His family, he's not Jewish, he's not from Europe. And he said, Mike, I don't think they can deal with it because the book is your grandmother dealing with all these traumas, all these mistakes that she made. And part of that was that when she became a parent after she was released from a labor camp in Kazakhstan. She was released into a work camp that wasn't that much different. And everyone was very separate. It was the former Soviet Union where no one trusted anybody. Nobody spoke. She didn't have any parental figures. She didn't know if her mother was alive. It was years later she found out that her mother was alive. And as she became a parent, she made lots of mistakes because she didn't know how to be a parent. And it was through the book that she was really facing her darkest you say the word choices, but they weren't really choices. The way that she lived, that through engaging and looking back, she realized that she was doing the best she could, but she had to put all the pieces together to understand how much healing was required. And I think that me being a generation out makes it a lot easier for me to really get in and deal with it. And if this was a story where I see my own upbringing, I see the parts of me being a baby who maybe was not cared for in the right way because nobody knew how to do that, it would have been a really difficult, situation. So.
And trauma is generational. So, I mean, it's interesting to see that you felt that in your own kind of upbringing, then witnessing it through the reading of this memoir of your grandmother.
Oh, yeah, that's the whole thing. For me, there's so much in her memoir. There's so much history. There's so much, her story is a little different than the usual Jewish story that's told because she went further into the Soviet Union. She didn't end up in the camps. So that's a whole other chapter that doesn't get as much attention, and she really documents that. So there's a lot of geography. But the piece that really hit me was the healing aspect. And as I was reading this book, I thought it would be connecting me to understanding maybe some of my history. But I started to see myself in it. I started to see how my grandmother responded to scenarios, that there's a thread in how I respond when I'm living my life. But the context, I'm not being thrown from a train. I'm not in solitary confinement. I'm living like a normal life, but I see that my nervous system, there's an alignment. And then also with my parents who, like many people, I grew up thinking my parents are nuts. But then as I'm going through this book, I started to see they're not nuts at all. And in fact, many of the strangest experiences of my childhood make total sense. And I can give an example if you want it.
Yeah. Sure.
It's like when I was a kid, a teenager, a friend called late at night in the summer, and I have an older brother, and this friend was like, hey, I would like to carry this bathtub from my house a couple blocks, from someone else's house to my house a couple blocks. Can you guys come help me? And we're like, yeah, sure, we're not doing anything. And my dad's there, and he's like, where are you guys going? And we're like, we're going to carry this bathtub down the street. And he's like, oh, you definitely can't do that. And we're like, why not? He said, because you'll get arrested. And we're like, why would we get arrested carrying a bathtub down the street? And he's like, just because. So then my brother, who was kind of like a hornet's nest kicker at the time, he's like, okay, let's call the police and ask them. So then my dad's like, okay, because he's sure he's right.
Yeah.
So we call the police. My dad puts it on speakerphone. He's like, this is Dr. Friedman. I'm with my 2 sons. They're teenagers. They want to carry a bathtub down the street. And then it's like dead silence. And the officer's like, okay. And he's like, can they do that? And then the officer's like, yeah, you can do that.
Yeah.
That's okay. And then my brother's like, gotcha. And then we were out the door. But as we were out the door, my dad was like, if you get arrested, it's on you.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow. But they were just so afraid from like what they're growing up, the generational trauma maybe.
Well, of my 4 grandparents, 3 of them survived because they were arrested for doing absolutely nothing. And then as I saw in my grandmother's book, she has 3 different accounts of getting the knock on the door in the middle of the night from the secret police. And each time the punishment was, first she was banished from the city because they wanted her apartment, and then she got banished further, and then she got arrested. So, and this is not, this wasn't a million years ago. This is the people who raised my parents.
Yeah.
This is, the book is my mom's mom, but my dad's dad has the same stories, but another twist. So as I was seeing example of what my grandmother went through, and her story, while it's unique, is also not unique. It's a story of what people experienced in that time. I started to put together all these pieces. And there was one night when I did a smaller presentation to a smaller audience at a synagogue. And I was telling all these stories and I was reading excerpts. And then when the night was done, I was surrounded by people. And they were all like, that's my family. You're describing your family, but you're describing my family. And I thought it was just my family, but it's the same thing. And as I started to unpack this more and more, a lot of the healing and a lot of the kind of journeying backwards to this present moment, I realized it's not my family's story. It's not a unique tale. It's what everyone who's connected to this history, or basically the history of trauma through war, there's specifics that tie in to how maybe my nervous system responds, but this is not a uniquely Jewish phenomenon. So that's where I started getting drawn in deeper and deeper through the lens of trying to understand what kind of healing we need in this moment, and how important it is for us to go back and fill in the details, because once it gets passed down generation after generation, it gets really abstract. It's like if I'm driving down the street and I'm taking my kids to school and I'm thinking like, I wonder if I'm going to get arrested today. And I go like, that's a pretty weird random thought. I got to talk with my therapist. But it is a weird random thought, but it's also, there's a straight line going back to where I came from and where my family came from. And to unpack it without that context, I don't know what that would look like.
We're speaking with Mike Friedman, who lives in Greenfield and who will be performing About This, It Was Not Yet Written, tomorrow, the 12th, at Bombyx in Florence. let's hear a selection and tell us a little bit about how you've interpreted this, harrowing story into some music.
Sure. I'm going to play a medley of two pieces. So the book starts with my grandmother's life when she's 17 years old. She's living in Romania, and she's given notice that the area of Romania she's in is about to be occupied by the Soviet Union. They have 2 days to choose, either stay where you are or go deeper into Romania or become basically a Soviet citizen. And then her mother is like, we're staying. Her mother had escaped Russia into Romania when she was 17. So my grandmother's like, this is crazy. Why are we doing this? And then the book goes back in time to when her mother is 17 and works its way all the way back up to the present moment, and then keeps going up until basically I'm a teenager. There's even a picture of my bar mitzvah at the end of the book, which is not the most interesting part. So I'm going to play a suite it's of a tune called Chisinau Bulgar, which is where my grandmother was in Romania. And then I'm going to merge it with Odessa Bulgar. Bulgar means dance. It's Yiddish for dance. And Odessa is where my grandmother was before she escaped into Romania. And then it'll go back to Chisinau Bulgar.
Mike Friedman, who'll be at Bombyx tomorrow. That is Mike Friedman, who will be at Bombyx in Florence tomorrow, performing About This, It Was Not Yet Written. We'll take a quick little break, and we'll be right back with Mike.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
Welcome back to the Fabulous 413. We're with Greenfield via Brooklyn via Toronto's Mike Friedman, who will be performing his family's story at Bombyx in Florence tomorrow. It's called About This, It Was Not Yet Written.
Guitar is not the instrument that you often see in klezmer music. How is it arranging klezmer-inspired pieces, not just for this, but beyond, because you also play pedal steel?
It's tricky. I mean, the music sits really comfortably on certain instruments, so figuring out how to get that articulation, it's a bit of a journey. Sometimes I have to sit. I mean, these are melodies I've been playing for 25 years, so sometimes I'm still discovering how to have it sing. And sometimes it's, I'm playing half the phrase at one part of the neck, and then I'm moving all the way up to get the rest, just so my fingers can move in a certain way.
It's klezmer shredding is what it looked like.
It is, for sure. Yeah. But super interesting because, again, you don't usually see six-stringed instruments like this in klezmer music, so very cool.
Yeah, it is very cool. And we were talking about the klezmer scene in Greenfield, which is strikingly amazing.
It is surprisingly large. It's amazing.
Eileen Stahl is an incredible clarinet player and lives in Greenfield as well. Well, we want to have you play us out, but I'll say that tomorrow on the show we'll be focusing on the NEPM documentaries Legacies, Stories of Black History in the 413. We'll be talking with the filmmakers behind that. We'll also be talking with the Pioneer Valley Symphony about their Holiday Pops concert.
And, of course, our weekly chat with Congressman Jim McGovern. If you've got a question, email us at thefab413@nepm.org.
And we will leave you with Mike Friedman, who will be at Bombyx tomorrow. About This, It Was Not Yet Written is the name of the performance. Thanks for listening. Take it away, Mike.
New England Public Media is funded by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Coming up next on All Things Considered, inflation was a little bit higher in November than October, but probably not high enough to alarm policymakers at the Federal Reserve. The central bank is still expected to lower interest rates. Many presidents face failed cabinet picks, so when former Representative Matt Gaetz withdrew from consideration from President-elect Trump's cabinet, it wasn't unprecedented, though Trump's style has been. Meanwhile, FBI Director Christopher Wray says he will be stepping down at the end of the Biden administration. And the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia will be hosting football's World Cup in 2034. The news has stirred backlash amongst critics who point to the country's questionable human rights record. Details on these and other news items are ahead on NEPM, WFCR, 88.5 FM and HD Amherst, WNNC 640 AM Westfield, streaming at nepm.org. NPR News and Local Perspective for Western Mass. All Things Considered is funded by October Mountain Financial Advisors, locally owned, privately held, octobermountainfa.com, and by the Lathrop Communities, serving older adults in the Quaker tradition, senior independent living in Northampton and East Hampton, Massachusetts, lathrop.kendall.org. It's 4 o'clock.
It's why we have it on offline. You can't hear the program right now. You don't
go to All Things Considered in your headphones while you're playing.
Because that's often distracting. But we'll just tell people, just play. It's still recording.
Okay. Give me the warning. That's what happens. That was great.
That's so cool. I had so many more questions. We just
I know we didn't get to talk about John Zorn.
or like anybody else that you've played with, or like making the arrangement itself, which I had questions about, and how like you set up the show, because like it incorporates so many elements, and like whether or not like building the show made like more like traditional folk songs bleed into your like other arrangements, like how pervasive was making this show over the way that you're writing now, like all these other questions. So do the show again so we can ask you about it.
Are you like talking in between the songs to tell the story, or how is the story told?
Yeah, so the way it's going to work is some excerpts are going to be read. Do you know Rabbi Andrea?
Avazian?
No, Kainer Cohen.
Oh yeah, Rabbi.
So, Rabbi, yeah.
Yeah. I know Reverend Andrea Avazian, but I know.
Oh, okay.
I know Rabbi.
So she's going to basically play the part of my grandmother and read a couple excerpts that stand on their own really well.